everything is really messy when it's involving the White Sox right now.
It is. And it's funny, like I'm seeing a lot of fans and even I've had the thought like, oh, my prediction of a mid 80s win total was very optimistic. And it's feeling that way. But part of my optimism was almost forced in the sense of, well, if they can't even win 85 or 86 games this season, then they're in trouble. So it was more or less saying like, you got to do this or else what has this all been for? And right now they're forcing that question upon fans really early, and that's not good.
Yeah, before Friday's game, White Sox general manager Rick Hahn made another gaslighting attempt when speaking with reporters. This time we got these quotes from Paul Sullivan of the Chicago Tribune, which, to Paul Sullivan's credit, he likes to poke the bear. And he definitely poked the bear in his tone and question to Rick Hahn about how this season feels very similar to 2022. And Rick Hahn said, quote, "You guys always hear from the most negative fans. The fans I talk to never come up to me and say, Rick, this is the start of just the same stuff as last year. They seem to seek you guys out in the comment sections. Imagine that," end quote. Well, Rick, the roster is in the same position as it was last year. Again, the 2022 White Sox started 6-2. We were pretty happy back then. They won 3 straight series and then proceeded to lose 8 straight games to fall to 6-10. They would end April 8-12. The 2023 White Sox are currently 6-10. There are 7 players on the injured list already, and their top 3 minor league prospects are also hurt. That is something that has also not been talked a lot about. Noah Schultz is hurt, Colson Montgomery is hurt, Brian Ramos is hurt. As 2 individuals who are well known in covering the White Sox, Jim, and there are comment sections of the posts on SoxMachine.com, we hear from White Sox fans daily. I have no idea what White Sox fans Rick Hahn is speaking with, because I put up a Twitter poll asking a simple question: is Rick Hahn doing a good job? 3,290 votes. 95.6% said no. That is by far and away one of the largest polls we've ever done on Twitter. Rick Hahn's overall resume is currently 706 wins, 827 losses. I did the math for you guys. That's a winning percentage of .461 over a 162 game season. That's a 75-87 record. The White Sox are 2-5 in the postseason. He's had 4 managers during his tenure. His roster is overall playing bad baseball. And yes, there are some highlights, but overall their record tells the whole story. Mm-hmm. Why is it impossible for Hahn to say, we hear the fans? We are not playing great baseball right now. We are once again dealing with injuries. We are going to do everything we can to overcome these hurdles early. The guy on Friday is not regaining any trust with actual White Sox fans. Instead, he has chosen to gaslight them.
Yeah, I think it's one of 2 things. One is that, it could be a case where he was responding to Sullivan kind of in kind. Like, Sullivan was, as you mentioned, poking the bear. Like he in the same column, he talked about how Mike Clevenger, his entrance music is very questionable given the off season that he had. Gold Digger, which he caught, and he asked Clevenger directly about.
Everyone in the stands in our section, in section 108, other season ticket holders, we made the same point when it was happening in real time.
Yeah, and he asked Clevenger about it. Clevenger had some kind of dumb response, but he included it. There wasn't anything newsworthy that came of it, but he's not afraid to ask those questions and get responses that might not be favorable. So, he might have asked the question of Hahn, and without having heard the audio myself, like, could be a case where Hahn was trying to be like snarky back to him, but not realizing that, oh, these are being relayed to the public and, without maybe the context. So there's that. But let's say he's in a case where like he does not get approached by fans. One, we got a comment, speaking of comment sections, on the post on Sox Machine where I briefly mentioned Hahn's comments, from Shy Sox ND12, who said that he and his brother were umpires for Hahn's son's travel league teams. And so they saw him a bunch at games, and they never said anything negative about him, even though they didn't approve. It's just because like he's there watching his kids in a public space. They're not going to go up to him and harass him for a job poorly done. It's like, it's not something you do. And like, if I saw Hahn, I might say something just because like I've talked to him a few times, like I met him a few times in person. We've had, some exchanges. So like, that's a case where like, I might say something, but like if I saw Pedro Grifol, who I've never met, who doesn't know who I am probably, I would not say like, hey, Pedro, what the hell are you doing at the bullpen? Like I'd say, hey, Pedro, nice to meet you. I'm Jamarlo. And if it got to a point where we're having like an extended discussion, like I might, ask questions, but first time meeting him, in, a public setting, like I would not, most people are polite. Most people have some sense of like, oh, I don't want to be a jerk to this guy, even if I don't like him. He doesn't seem like a terrible human. I just don't care for the job he does. So there's that. The other possibility is that maybe he doesn't understand sarcasm. Like maybe fans come up to him and say like, hey, Rick, great job you're doing. I hope you never leave. You've truly built a juggernaut. Nothing about this team reminds me of 2022 whatsoever. Great job. Thumbs up. I love going to games. I've never been happier. And he takes it as thank you.
I doubt that. I doubt that. I do doubt that. The thing about if it's a comment that he didn't think is going to be written or posted to the Chicago Tribune, my dude, you have been part of a major league front office for 2 decades.
Yeah.
You've been the general manager of the Chicago White Sox for a decade. Unless you say the words off record, everything is on the record in this setting.
I think it was a failed attempt at snark that just didn't, because like what reminded me of was last trade deadline, he tried to like get on the fan side and say like, well, if you're upset about our inactivity besides Jake Diekman, join the club. So am I. I understand where they're coming from. And like, pretending like he's not the guy in charge of converting on targets or augmenting the roster or whatever, like, words he likes to use. Talk about adding players. Like, he was trying to be like, I'm with them. And like, no, we're against you. You can't be against yourself. So like he tried to take that tack. And then, after Tony La Russa left and he hired Grifol and like he had all those backhanded comments about the way the team was run. It's just like, for a while he tried like taking the side of fans and channeling some frustration through his own voice, even though like, that's not really possible. It doesn't really work since he's the agent of change for this roster and the way things are run, or as close to it as possible, since Kenny doesn't talk much and Jerry doesn't talk at all. So, I mean, like he's the public face for the powers that be. And so he can't do that. So maybe he's like, well, that failed. So I'm going to go back to just, sniping at fans again because I'm sensitive about it. Like, that's, but to me, like, it just seemed like a failed attempt to snark. Like, if fans are sounding off its comment section, it's because it's the only place where they feel like feedback can be heard and received and responded to with any kind of thought. Whereas the White Sox are just more or less like shut off from the public. And, that's just the way it's been. And it's the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future.